Report from the Ministry of State Security of the USSR, February 19, 1951. Top secret. To Stalin. To stop further anti-Soviet underground activity of the Jehovists, the Ministry of State Security considers it necessary to arrest the leaders of the Jehovist sect and to expel to Irkutsk and Tomsk regions all discovered Jehovists and their families from Ukraine, Belarus, Moldavia, Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia. In total 8,576 persons, 3,048 families were in resettlement from Moldavian SSR, 1,675 persons, 670 families, Ukrainian SSR, 6,140 persons, 2,020 families, Belarusian SSR, 394 persons, 153 families, Lithuanian SSR, 76 persons, 48 families, Latvian SSR, 52 persons, 27 families, Estonian SSR, 250 persons, 130 families.
You will hear the stories of eyewitnesses, the opinions of experts, and you will find out what simple people had to go through just because their faith in God did not fit into the Soviet state ideology. We invite you to come on the journey with us.
Before the exile, they persecuted Jehovah's Witnesses greatly, especially during elections, because they did not go to vote.
And the police officer came and lined us up. First my mother, then all the children. Then he put a gun to her neck and said he will shoot every one of us.
They asked my father to sign that he is renouncing his beliefs as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. My father said, "There is no way I can reject the God in whom I believe."
We packed our feather mattresses, our pillows, and the food we had at home. But the head of the village said, "Take a saw with you, or an axe." The whole collective farm came to our yard, and they took us away as though we were criminals.
Even during the loading of their belongings onto the trucks, witnesses used the opportunity to preach. For example, in one village, the family head had stand on the highest part of the vehicle and started preaching from up there to his fellow villagers. He talked about the Bible and why they were being expelled. And the interesting thing was that the truck didn't go until he's finished.
When they took us away, the country people, including our relatives, they weren't fellow believers, not witnesses. They cried.
At first, they planned to expel a specific number of people, but in fact there were far more. Moldova took first place in that regard. They planned to expel 1,600 people from Moldova, but actually they expelled almost 1,000 more. And from Lithuania they deported 2 times more. They planned to deport 76 persons, but ended up expelling 150.
They drove us to the wagons and started loading us onto them one by one.
There was no toilet, there was nothing. There weren't even any holes drilled out.
The conditions of sanitation were terrible. Even the convoy heads complained about the conditions. I have in my hand the report of one of those heads. I quote, "In response to my question about how in practice the deportees who are supposed to go to the toilet during the journey, the deputy minister replied that they would have to use barrels that the exiled families had brought with them."
We went further, and it got colder and colder, so we wore warm clothes.
There were cases when bad-reading people were deported. The most striking human cases, in our opinion, are, for example, the case when a mother with a child who has meningitis were deported. This child later died in a railroad car. Or for example, we are certain there was a case when a woman who was at the last stage of pregnancy was subject to deportation. She gave birth right in the railroad car. Such people were not shown mercy. They were deported as well.
Once, when train stopped, one more freight train arrived. We heard singing. They were our brothers and sisters from Moldova.
They sang at the top of their voice. No one was ashamed of anyone. Children sang who could.
Everyone was somehow trying not to be sad because of what they had left behind. They didn't know where they are being taken, but they hope that everything will be fine.
Brother came up. Ola, do you have pencils? I will write a sign to put up on the window that we are Jehovah's Witnesses.
And we also started to write posters Jehovah's Witnesses to encourage one another, to let them know that they are not going alone, but also other people.
Upon arrival to Siberia, deported people had to live in different conditions. Some lived in the barracks, some had to share home with other families, and some even had to live in dugouts.
The barrack, such a large and long barrack, it had 3 sections. There were no separate apartments. Well, the table was big and long for people to eat there, and bunk beds around. So 126 people were settled in this barrack.
We went to sleep, but after a while everyone started spinning. So then someone said to turn on the light. We look, something bites. We look, and everything is covered in blood. Neck, arms, and bedbugs are climbing.
My mother worked. She had to go and do logging. They sawed by hand and cut logs. The work was very hard for both the women and the men.
They forced children aged between 12 and 16 to work the same as adults, so in that sense the children were robbed of their childhood.
And for me, it is of course important now that I am older to maintain my life course. The past that they suffered, my mother's suffering, my father's being imprisoned, naturally, it probably had an effect on my life. But I am content.
Operation NARS was a complete failure, because the achieved results were totally opposite to the original goals that had been set.
The operation was thought up in order to put an end to them. But it, on the one hand, drew them together, and on the other hand, gave them the opportunity to spread their religion throughout the Soviet Union. That, of course, was not the result that anyone in power was expecting, had foreseen or wanted. It seems to me to be very important for these events to remain in our historical memory and occupy the honorable place it deserves. Because people who stood up for their convictions despite the cost of such great suffering and maintained and even expanded their religion are worthy of respect.
So that was how Operation North took place, changing forever the lives of thousands of totally innocent people. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, Jehovah's Witnesses finally achieved their long-awaited freedom. But today, in modern Russia, dozens of our fellow worshippers are once again behind bars, and hundreds are being subjected to criminal prosecution. Is 70 years not enough time to learn the lessons of the Soviet repression? You can decide for yourself.